Well, good morning, everyone. That was a very insightful conversation we just heard. But as we know, the workforce is all powered by the people that we have coming into our facilities, running our facilities, and ultimately plotting the future of our organizations. And I couldn't be happier to be welcomed today by Alison, Aaron, and Christina to talk about really what is happening in the workforce today. And so we're going to break our conversation really into three buckets. First is truly what is happening today? What are we experiencing? The second is how do we fill the pipeline for the future? And then finally, how do we train for the future? Because as we all know, it's not just recruiting, but retention of key employees and partners that is so incredibly important. So maybe we'll start with that, what's happening today. And Alison, I'm going to start with you. What's happening in the world of CBRE? I know as the Chief People Officer, you have a few employees, right? 115,000?
Yes.
So obviously a diverse workforce between your teams, but then also people that you have on site. You've gone through this pandemic evolution. So what's happening today?
So as you mentioned, CBRE is a large global organization with employees based around the world. We have a large percentage of our employees that work on site at our clients. Managing their facilities. So during the pandemic, they were working the entire time on site. We had a variety of other types of corporate roles as well as sales professionals. While they were home, they are back now in a hybrid environment. In the last couple of years, we saw a real challenge finding talent, especially for our key roles that are related to trades. And so we've had to really look at how to build pipelines, and find creative ways to entice talent to come to CBRE. A lot of times, being a commercial real estate, these trades roles can work at any kind of company. And so we really want to be a differentiator and creating an environment in which they can advance their careers. That has made the difference. We're definitely seeing a talent shortage let up a little bit, but we're not going to take our kind of focus off continuing to build pipeline. So when the markets change, we're still in a good position.
So we have one side of the equation is the over 100-year-old organization grown through acquisition, 115,000 global employees. On the other side, Christina, we have, congratulations, 1 week into your IPO, right, for Instacart.
So far, so good.
Yeah. So as she said earlier, the dust has not yet settled. Maybe they've mopped up some of the champagne, but the dust has not yet settled. So talk about running your organization as the Chief Human Resources Officer.
Sure. Well, we're just at a little bit different scale than Alison. We have around 3,000 employees, the majority of which are actually based near to our San Francisco office. And then on any given day, we have 600,000 shoppers out there. And those are gig workers. They're not our employees, but they're really obviously a huge part of why Instacart works the way it does. In terms of our employee base, obviously we had this incredible role to play during the pandemic where we were an essential service and helping bring food to people. But at the same time, we had to make sure that all of our employees were safe. So we've gotten very comfortable with folks working remotely. And as sort of we've come out of that, we've adopted something we call Flex First. And that means that employees get to choose where they work, whether it's at home or in one of our offices. But we sort of really try and prize the time we have together and really want to preserve that in certain ways. So once a quarter, we provide budget for what we call jams. We love a food pun at Instacart. So we have jams where once a quarter, teams get together to work on projects together, to collaborate, to co-create, team bonding, sure. But it's really meant to sort of make sure that cohesion is there. And to the discussion we were just listening to also allow for those relationships to get built. So there is a sense of mentorship for our younger employees as well. But we sort of maintain flexibility and hopefully are still building connective tissue.
Yeah. So Aaron, hearing this, and with your role as Commissioner of the Texas Workforce Commission, talk about your role not only engaging on behalf of employers to fill roles, but then also employees, because you're working on training and development of employees. to help when Christina or Alison call and say we have these critical roles?
Yeah, let me do this. First of all, let me say thanks to Hamid and Prologis for putting on this event. Let's give them a round of applause. 40 years, and so we appreciate that. A big way. And also, I understand the mayor's here and Jennifer with the Chamber of Commerce. I represent the employers here in Texas, and so we have contributed to the local economy in a big way through food and purchases of goods and services as well. But delighted to be here today. This is an exciting conversation. We're talking about the workforce right now, and I'm a commissioner that represents the employers. In Texas, we have two other commissioners, one that represents the labor side and the other that represents the public. And so my goal is to make sure that at the end of the day, employers have access to a workforce, a talent pipeline. They're in a position to fill those positions. We talked about and we heard about the shortage of labor from that standpoint. And so we want to make sure that employers are not leaving the state of Texas because they can't find the workforce. We want to make sure that that's there. And so we work hand in hand in listening to employers to make sure that we understand their needs. And then there are training programs and a number of other things that are taking place as well. Excited about Prologis because this morning Jamie had me introduced to Marv. And I already told Marv, and I was talking to him, I said, we need a guinea pig for any of the projects that Prologis is doing. Look at the great state of Texas for that. We're delighted to be here today.
So we have this current state, right? So we have we've emerged from the pandemic. We're getting people back in the office at different tempos, right, Christina? We talked about. I'm sure when Hamid was talking about that, what the tempo is that we bring people back to the office. It's an individual decision by company, right?
Right.
So now we're bringing people back to the office at our own tempo. But how are you seeing filling roles? And as I said, how do we fill the pipeline? How do we ensure that we have the right people queued up so that they're ready to go when we have to put them into these roles?
Yeah. So one thing to do is make sure that talent knows who you are as an employer. Something that we've done over the last couple of years is really infiltrate using talent marketing strategies to make sure that people that are in the commercial real estate industry know who CBRE is. But we offer so many types of roles. It's really important that we educate the workforce into who CBRE is, what kind of career can you have here, and it's beyond sometimes the traditional commercial real estate. Right. So using technology and using innovative strategies to get to the talent where the talent lives and educate them why they'd want to come work at your organization, and also making sure that your employee experience is strong. So one, you're trying to look at talent externally, but one, you also have to look at your talent internally. We've done a lot of work around understanding the employee experience. Where do our employees value what we do? How do we pull those levers and give them more of those own experiences? Where are the experiences that we need to improve? And by really shoring up that employee experience, you're going to ultimately have higher engagement, lower turnover, but also you have ambassadors that go out to their networks and really encourage people to stay and work and join CBRE. So again, that employee experience is like the most important thing that we focus on. And what our employees care about is career mobility, understanding what kind of career they can be offered, and showing examples of, not everything is vertical. We have lots of horizontal, and, careers are very fluid, and making sure that people understand that this could be a very long journey when you come to a company like CBRE.
Yeah, I can piggyback on that because I think employee experience is really important, and I try and think a lot about those key inflection points for employees where it makes a huge difference. I think one of those things, is as people first start. Those very first days, new hire orientation and getting people involved in what the company is really like from the get-go is incredibly important, especially as folks are remote, right? Because they're not going to have that natural physical sense of connection with people. So as you create your new hire orientation, we think really hard about how those opening days really connect them. We implement a shopping trip so that every one of our employees gets a chance to go and do a shop. That creates customer empathy, that creates a deeper understanding of our shoppers out there. And even for someone who's something like an engineer, it gives them a whole new perspective of the work they're going to do and what that's going to mean. Then we also try and bring in one of our founders and key executives to new hire orientation, so they hear directly from the get-go sort of what the most important moments are for the company, whether it's, our vision of creating access to food and more time to enjoy it, or whether it's the founding stories and creating that culture so that people hit the ground running, really. Yeah. Then the other thing is, I think, around career growth and helping people more deeply understand that at a place that's really growing and developing, career growth can mean more than just being promoted. I want to make sure people earlier in their career are thinking about how they grow their skill sets. They're taking on projects and how you can articulate what you're learning and then apply it to something else. So that's kind of all, those are sort of two really key moments, I think, for employees when they start and when they're thinking about growth and helping them shape that narrative for themselves.
But the reality for anyone that's an employer or even an employee, creating a culture or a culture of mentorship, when you have people that are remote, is really hard. And so how do you talked about the jam sessions, how do you create those moments where you can have people sticky to the company, you can have people getting that cultural lift from the company, but they're doing it through a Zoom screen? What was the joke is, I didn't know you were any bigger than this big for about 2 years because all you saw people was on Zoom.
Well, and people used to always start conversations with like, oh, you're taller, or in my case, shorter than I expected. That's like, that's just like how you started conversations in 2021, I think. Right. Yeah. I think it really requires intentionality. Right. And there's a couple things that I try and encourage with all of my team members. I mean, number one is really using one-on-ones most effectively. So when a manager is talking to a direct report or vice versa or a skip level, it's really important that the more senior leader in that conversation take the time to focus on what you're talking about. Take a few moments to have a bit of personal conversation with someone, and then despite the enticement of what's coming in on Slack, what's coming in on text, what's coming in on email, try and ground the conversation in the person you're actually talking to, because we've all been there. When you're on that Zoom screen and someone is doing something else, it's plain as the nose on your face, and every employee feels that. So we try and provide some real guidance to leaders about how they can have better one-on-ones. And then at the same token, we do think about those moments where we can bring people together, whether it's the jams or we are very active in our employee all hands. Yeah. So, we usually do a once a week employee all hands. So it is mostly via Zoom. Once a month, we try and encourage people to come into offices. But the all hands end with Q&A sessions where employees get to upvote and downvote questions for the exec staff. Wow. And so there's an element of sort of participation and input to the context there.
That's great.
Can I say something also, just something to touch upon, is managers, we find, are probably the most critical part of our organization. And upskilling, I know we're going to talk about upskilling just talent, but managers in general, a lot of times you get promoted into become a people manager and you don't necessarily have the skills in order to navigate those challenges. We've done a big focus on the onboarding experience, but also what's the hiring manager experience? How do they help onboard those employees? We spend a lot of time in the recruiting process. If you don't spend enough time in the onboarding experience, you're bound to go back and that hire will not make it through their first year. So in order to really focus on what managers need to know, we focus on what they need to tell their staff and really give them the tools to be equipped to lead in a productive way, which then trickles down to having more engaged workforce.
Scott, we were talking about where's the workforce gone? Where are they right now? And so these are good retention strategies. They keep employers there. What we work on is really getting employers to the table. Right now, employees rather to the table. And so there are a couple of initiatives that we have. The Texas Interns Unite initiative, where we have employers that are looking at internship opportunities. We talked about mentorship. That's very important. But internships offer individuals an opportunity to really figure it out if this is what they want to do. And so huge initiatives called Texas Interns Unite. We have a LinkedIn page where employers are there, and you have interns at the high school and the college level kind of coming together. Real big in the apprenticeship space as well. Texas is a right-to-work state, but if there are apprenticeship opportunities utilizing those programs, if the employer wants to utilize those, we encourage that. What's good for the employer is good for the employee, it's good for the city, the community, and the state. And then there's a program called the Make It Movement, where we've doubled down. You get a chance, you go out there and look at the Make It Movement. You're going to see that happening in big, big ways, where we're providing high school students with information. Alison, you kind of talked about it, where you can see it, look it, feel it. If you mentioned to a student working in a hospital, they'll talk about a doctor, a nurse, and maybe a pharmacy tech or something along those lines, but have no idea about all the other jobs that are out there and career opportunities that are there. So we're basically taking it to them where they have access to that. You get to answer the questions and the like, and then you show them that there are other opportunities, because that labor shortage is real for employers, and we need to make sure we're doing what we can to fill the gaps.
Yeah, so think about all the discussions we're having today and how dynamic all of our organizations are. It used to be, if you wanted to get in the commercial real estate space, you were either going to be a broker or a property manager. But think about everything that's being done around EV and sustainability and operating essentials and things that we're doing that it's telling the story. I think, Alison, when you opened up, you said it's about explaining. If you're going to fill the pipeline, the best way to do that is explain to people what you have to offer. And so have you seen that through, you talked about these initiatives, but is it a career fair setting where employers can come and tell their story? Would you give us as employers feedback, you need to do a better job telling your story?
Yeah.
What's your
opinion on that? It's all of the above. We just came from a job fair, career fair for students. You had about 2,000 students. We're in Corpus Christi, Texas. AEP, Electrical Utility Company, they had the big truck out there with the baskets and everything. I went to a company, and it was a polymer company. And at the table, they had these little pellets that were there. Yep. And I told him, the guy was telling me, I said, if a kid, and you would ask him what's a polymer, they would have no idea at all. They saw the pellets, but he said, well, this is the product that makes the can for Coke, the plastic for peanut butter. I said, put those things out there where kids can actually see it, feel it, and understand it from that point. And so making a difference for companies, logistics, what's logistics? My son, Matthew, his best buddy, Preston, logistics major. University of Arkansas, he's working for Lockheed Martin right now, did New York, sharp kid, New York leadership program. Now he's in Dallas. Logistics, a lot of different areas that one can go in those areas, but you have to show it to them. You have to bring them to the ports. You need to do that. And so my advice to companies is to really let folks see it, feel it, touch it, understand it. And that's what the Make It movement does. It actually brings folks out where they can actually see, touch it, and feel it.
Okay, before we leave the topic of filling the pipeline, we had a really interesting conversation about walking your teams through the fact that you can actually learn more and get a better working environment and not feel like you have to get promoted to do it. Okay, so the idea that I can actually expand my horizons, but I don't have to go from VP to SVP to do it. I don't have to go from associate to senior associate to do it. That's a cultural shift, because people used to think the only way I'll have upward trajectory is to get promoted. So filling the pipeline is internal as well. What's your take on that, Alison?
Yeah,
Before Alison says, I want to set up artificial intelligence as well. That was a conversation that we kind of talked about.
Yeah.
So
well, I think it's about, again, it goes back to educating the employees to understand growth is not necessarily always the traditional. And I think, the pandemic showed us that employees care more about like their personal lives now. There's a little bit more of they ask for balance that they didn't before. People care more about sustainability or environmental. They have other concerns other than just title or, I think compensation obviously people care about, but they also care about benefits. They care about, their own development. So I think when you can position it in a way that you talk about growth, it doesn't always have to be, so hierarchical or traditional. You can actually get people to engage in that. And I do think that, just around seeing opportunities and really honing in on what their interests are, people care more about their own personal growth, and the professional kind of follows.
And there's something so positive there, right?
Yeah.
If you can help, especially folks who are newer in career, understand that by growing and expanding their skills, they might learn something they like better.
Right.
They might find that they really have a gift somewhere. I mean, those are all really the positives there. We do something we'll call like a bungee program, where if someone goes out on a family leave for one reason, then maybe someone else could take on their responsibilities temporarily, see how it goes, see how they like it, and use that as a way for people to sort of open their aperture a bit about what's out there. And I think it's important to emphasize that, as well as be clear about the economic realities of where we are as a nation right now. I don't think that necessarily there's so much extra money just floating around that people are always going to be promoted as quickly as maybe they once were. And I also think that as people think about the efficiencies of their companies, the wingspan, meaning the ratio of managers to direct reports, collapsing the layers in an organization, whether it's Amazon or others, lots of us are thinking about how we make our companies more efficient. So that means the very straightforward binary promotion path is not going to be this huge, golden ticket for many. They need to think about how they can expand in different ways, and underpinning that then that helps them in terms of individual satisfaction too.
Yeah, that's great.
Scott, I think along those lines, the reality is there are expectations of more money, and we know that to be true, but the way we communicate that is important. And so I think that's what it gets back to, communication. If an individual knows that AI is out there and this job may be going away in that sense, if you provide them with the skill set, or you show them where you may not make more money, but you may not lose a job, having a job versus not, and not communicating it in that direct. But communication is key.
Yeah.
We learned that through the pandemic. The more you're communicating, we went through a rapid process improvement situation at the agency. The first thing that folks thought were we're going to get rid of jobs from that point, but that was not the case at all. We were looking at improvements, and so communicating that is very, very important.
Yeah.
So that's a good way to kind of step from where we are today to then we talked about how we fill that pipeline, but now how do we train for the future? And now we got to train the trainers when it comes to things like AI and it comes to things like automation. I think about even in our own facilities. So how are you all thinking in your organizations about, we talked about it, it's not only recruiting but retaining. So you have to train that talent for what's next. Yeah. How are you thinking about that at CBRE?
Well, so AI is the hottest topic, and what we are doing is thinking about use cases and trying to do it in a very intentional way. So we have a number of kind of subgroups going on. There's AI kind of sandboxes where you can kind of get and start feeling and using it in different components. We also have a transformation office that's really going to look at what are the most impactful ways to leverage. One, the company continues to grow. We want to maintain costs. How can AI help us do that? But it does not by any means mean jobs will go away. It means jobs will have more higher value work. And then so what we'll need to do is upskill our workforce through learning and development opportunities or on-the-job training, because again, some of the administrative tasks will go away through automation. And even in my own department, the HR department, we have lots of processes that have been very administratively burdensome. As we have evolved, what I'm consistently telling our teams are, use this as an opportunity. Your job, something that might have taken you 6 hours, can now take just moments because we've been able to automate. So now you're able to do more valuable work. And it may mean that we can hire at a slower pace. It doesn't necessarily mean that we don't need your job. Your job will just become more valuable.
Yeah, I think, even looking at the company here, I was talking to Marv earlier, the access to resources and information. I always say our success is bringing together the worlds of workforce, economic development, and education. Workforce, economic development, and education, and you couple that with elected leadership that gets it, then you're well on your way to success. And so if you're talking to a company about training opportunities or a need for training, there are programs that a company can leverage so that they're not having to do it all themselves. At least in Texas, that's the way we work to make sure that companies that have access to that training so that you can upskill, so that you can make that situation that much better. And that benefits the employer at the end of the day, and it also benefits that employee as well.
That's great.
Yeah, I think for us, AI is certainly on the tip of everyone's tongue about everything, but in addition to just sort of naming the technology, it's about encouraging employees in every way to sort of employ first principles thinking, to be really creative, to think about how they solve existing problems, more quickly, more easily, with more automation. We've done a lot of interesting acquisitions at Instacart where we've brought in employees from different companies, whether that's Rosie, Eversight, Caper, where they're bringing new perspectives to the company that helps us think about problems we've tackled before. And then as employees are sort of thinking about how to integrate information and technology, we want people to be really innovative in their thinking, not to be like falling back on, oh, this is what I did at the last place I worked at. And
right.
So we do a lot to try and support that mindset.
So, okay, but when you really dig down into how to train on new initiatives, I love, Aaron, your comment around bringing in partners, because sometimes your organization itself needs to be trained. So you can't look inward and say, how are we going to train our teams about AI or whatever it might be? Because we may not know. We have to kind of train the trainers to get to that stair step. So
to that point, we with this AI, we're talking about that. And so at the agency, our executive director is basically, we have companies coming in, those that are in that AI space. We're going to hear from employers today in that space. We're having those subject matter experts because they know a whole lot more than we would ever know. But
yeah.
Our goal is to really be a leader in that regard, because with this advent of things happening, we need to make sure that we know what's happening so that those jobs that may be going away, you use them in different ways. There was an example of a person that works on projects where they're high in the sky. They're doing things like that. That job goes away. Well, that person has a skill set to work in those type of environments. The employers have needs with data, analytics, and the like. We need to be able to match those two. There's an employer, I had an example, my first one, a young lady who had about 30 years of experience in real estate. Job was going away because the real estate decision is now being done by AI. In that sense, making decisions from that point. A lot of expertise on the real estate side, so I pointed her to the Texas Department of Housing and Community Affairs, another agency that deals heavy in the real estate space. She has a skill set that can be transferred to other things, and so that's what we have to do with using data analytics to find that match right away when the employer has a need. This employee has that skill set, may not be used in this area, but matching that, that's a good use of technology to make a difference.
Great. Okay, so as we wrap up the discussion, we started with talking about where's the workforce gone. We've heard a bunch of different gems about ways that you're differentiating for your organization, but as leaders of your organizations, what would your biggest piece of advice be to others, either in your space or young people joining the workforce, as to how to engage in today's environment? I think about when I grew up in the business versus today, it's completely different. The whole 9-to-5 idea being chained to your desk versus today. So what would your advice be? Maybe Christina, I'll start with you, about how to jump into this pool and be successful.
Yeah, well, I have a 22-year-old daughter who's currently got her first paying job in New York City.
Congratulations.
So this advice is not only like what I would say in theory, but what I talked about with her last night. But it's not just because she's 22. I mean, I think it's really important for every new employee, whether it's your first job or your 15th job, to go in and fully engage. And to really, that requires an effort. And when we're remote or behind a screen, all the more reason that you've got to sort of put effort forth, ask questions, follow up. And we tend to think, people would like more work-life balance and they want to be able to have their personal time. But when you're working, I think it's so important that you try and be accretive to every conversation. If you're in a meeting and you're listening to something you don't understand, it's time to ask questions. So
that's great.
I'm going to answer. You're going to hit that. Great question.
No, keep going.
So I'll say I also have 2 boys. They're off the payroll, both of them.
Woo.
Congratulations.
Yeah.
but one business data analytics master's, and then the other on the communications side. Their internships were very important. Those were very important for them. They learned a lot from that standpoint. That's for the younger. There's something called mentornships as well, a new thing that I learned years ago, where individuals that may be a little bit older, a little bit more seasoned, they're looking at doing something different. I'm in finance or whatever. Now I want to do something else. I want to go into the nonprofit world or something along those lines. There are companies that offer mentorship opportunities as well. And then we hit a lot with our veterans in Texas, veterans that are training. Internships for veterans right now, that's also being offered where they're getting ready to transition out of the military service, but they have an opportunity to intern, and they do that in some of the city operations as well. And so those are good opportunities. You don't even have to pay them at that point because they're already paid, but those are all initiatives that are out there. But to the younger, it's just get involved, get encouraged, and ask the questions. Both of my boys have been young men now, very successful in doing what they need to do to get to that next step.
All right, Alison, close us out. What's your advice?
I say lean in and be actively engaged. I mean, I think whether or not that's in an office or on a call, whatever that may be. I mean, for me, in my own career, I kind of grew up at CBRE, saying yes to opportunities, projects, anything, being inquisitive. Those are the people that I think get opportunities brought to them, especially when you are someone that says, yes, I'll figure it out. You don't know everything. I mean, I tell anyone that starts at our company is don't be afraid to ask questions, stop people, don't just try to impress them thinking that you know. That's how you become really informed. And so being present and being engaged, those are the ways to be successful.
That's great. Tracy, I think we're going to welcome you up because we may have some questions from the audience.
Just one. I think we have time for one.
Okay.
Lots of questions on attracting, retaining, and AI, so you kind of nailed it. But really, I think one of the comments that Hamid mentioned in the last segment is the ability to see around corners. So as leaders, what are you all thinking about and trying to do to project or imagine what might be next for you all?
I can start. I mean, I think that it's really important in my role in leading people that you are utilizing data where you have it. So we do regular surveys where we look at employee engagement and people's responses to things. And we usually ask a question about people's intent to stay. And after years and years of doing this, people are 100% honest. If you ask them, do you intend to be here for another year, more than 2 years, more than 3 years, you can track the data and see that people will tell you. And so asking that question on a regular basis so you have a sense of what attrition might look like is pretty important.
That's great.
Tracy, I think you guys provide the best example here at this company because you're always looking at what's next, what's around the corner. And so we try to follow that motto and that to look at what's next. AI is what's next in a lot of ways. Where's the workforce gone? Gig economy, lack of child care, all those kind of things, hybrid type situations, they want to work at home and the like. And so we need to be leading in all of those particular areas in order to make a difference.
Alison?
Well, I'd say I think data is really important. Understanding who your workforce is today, understanding what your business development opportunities are, and understanding what skills will be needed in order to fulfill those, for us, client needs. That is how we can either upskill what we have or go out to market and find that talent and build those pipelines. What we're trying to do with our workforce data is to be less reflective and more predictive. And that's been a focus, and we continue to really put a lot of energy into that, taking engagement information, culture surveys, and retention. From history, you can kind of predict the future.
Great.
That's great.
Well, how about a round of applause for our panel? Thank you very much.